A conflict is raging between Palestinian armed groups and Israel Defense Forces. Nearly 4,500 Palestinians have died, more than 1,000 Israelis. But the cost of this conflict can be measured not only in the lives that have ended, but in the toll taken on the living, especially the children.
Imagine living in a world where violence was part of daily life. To worry that familiar sidewalks and neighborhoods may be killing zones. To know that a simple trip to the market could mean risking your life. This is the reality for many children here in the occupied Palestinian territory and Israel. Meet 10-year-old May and 12-year-old Astar, sisters living in the Israeli town of Sderot with their parents, younger brother, and baby sister. On the other side of the conflict, in the West Bank, in the occupied Palestinian territory, lives 10-and-a-half-year-old Mara. They do the things most girls their age do, but their childhood is far from normal. They are 3 of the estimated more than 4 million children living in this conflict every day. A conflict so traumatic, the scars may last a lifetime. Mara's story begins one night in early January 2003.
I was home. I was sleeping with my siblings.
At 4 a.m., in an instant, everything changed.
I heard the sound of an explosion from outside the window.
Israel Defense Forces surrounded her house on 4 sides in an operation the Israelis say they carry out only when there is a security threat.
And over here were soldiers. Over there were soldiers. And over there were soldiers. I was in a state of panic and fear. I was hearing the noise of explosions and grenades and shooting.
She watched as her house was destroyed before her eyes. With all she witnessed that early morning, one event affected her most of all. Her uncle, Ashab, who the family believes was a target of the raid, lay shot in front of her. Mara was only 7.5 years old.
Here was my uncle Ashab. He was lying here. He was wounded in his leg and chest. I looked at him and saw something white coming out of his mouth. I said, he is dying. God have mercy.
Before, life was normal.
Mara's father.
Marah was an intelligent girl. She was happy in school, very happy.
And now,
she wakes up at night screaming. She tells me there's someone, there's sound, there's shooting. She tells me Ashab is calling for me.
With time, the nightmares got worse. I wake up terrified. I have a terrible headache. I'm scared to go to the bathroom.
she began wetting the bed, afraid to leave her room in case Israel Defense Forces came back. Her grades plummeted. She had flashbacks during class, and she began spending almost all her time alone. Fears of losing her family plagued her, visions of being left without anyone to protect her. Psychology experts say that tens of thousands of Palestinian children suffer like this after witnessing high levels of Israeli military incursions and bombings, losing family members to the violence, or having to cope with the emotional aftermath of being shot or injured themselves.
Sometimes mental pain is as traumatic, and if not more traumatic even than physical pain.
Dr. Cairo Arafat is director of the Child Rights Planning Unit of the Palestinian National Authority.
Children do go through a lot of bad things in life, and war is one of the worst, I think, because it permeates every aspect of their lives. It becomes a part of who they are, a part of their identity, and they carry it with them.
Also carrying it with them, the parents, such as Mara's. All they can do is hope to find a way to help their children and offer them comfort when the sun goes down and the nightmares start. Night also offers little refuge to those children living on the other side of the conflict, like sisters Astar and May here in Sderot, a town barely 3 miles from the Gaza Strip, a town sometimes referred to as the bullseye of Israel. Rockets plunge to the ground after dark. Others strike in broad daylight. More than 7,000 children live on the front line here as Palestinian armed groups fire into Sderot crudely made rockets loaded with explosives. They're called Qassams. And the first hit in 2001, more than 2,500 have followed. 7 have been killed, 4 of whom were children, and hundreds have been injured. Streets in Sderot are often deserted, playgrounds empty.
Here, there is a constant feeling of fear. If it happens, what will we do?
Well, there's a sense of always being on guard. There's a sense of, I'm always looking left, I'm always looking right, I'm waiting for the next possible attack.
Dr. Naftali Halberstadt is Director of Psychotrauma Response Programs for the Joint Distribution Committee in Israel.
They don't have a feeling of safety. They don't know whether they're going to get to school without something happening on the way, or coming home, or whether the parent who's going to go out to work is going to come back.
It's a psychological waiting game that claims many of its own casualties.
When I'm not at home, I'm afraid something will happen to my family. When I'm home, I'm also afraid it might fall on the house and we'll have problems ever recovering from the trauma and the fears.
And then suddenly, in the middle of our interview, her fear became reality. A Qassam has been fired. They have just seconds to rush to shelter. They make it just in time.
It's a trauma to the children. We're afraid. We're afraid because the children are afraid.
Astar and May's mother tries to keep her children calm, especially 10-year-old May, who was still shaken by the Qassam that fell during our interview.
Suddenly, I saw everyone coming out. I was afraid I wouldn't make it out. I was afraid and I was shivering.
May shows us a drawing she made in school that day, one that she says helps express her fears of the Qassams.
This is a girl in the park, and suddenly there is a siren, and she's screaming. Qassams are falling on the innocent children below. The sun is crying, so they don't have to.
But May does cry, constantly, her mother says, and she began to get headaches, crippling ones.
The headaches became worse until I would scream, my head, and I would go crazy, and they took me to the hospital.
And that visit turned into a month's stay. The diagnosis, stress. It was devastating, says her mother.
I don't want to remember this time.
But the memory and the pain come flooding back.
I don't want to remember this. You don't know how hard it was.
I don't want to talk of this.
For a whole month, she woke up screaming from the pain in her head.
Her head, and now stomach aches that begin when she leaves for school. Symptoms like that can affect up to 7 out of 10 children in both Sderot and in the occupied Palestinian territory. What can be done to help these children heal? Some techniques used in Sderot's schools relaxation exercises and psychodrama which allow children to be children once again, even if for a moment. As for Mara, from the West Bank, she meets with a counselor every week and commits her memories to paper. And now she's told to do something new, to draw a new memory, one in which she and her family are safe. But with too few resources and limited access to care, an estimated 80% of Palestinian children who want ongoing counseling don't receive it. And that has the parents of children on both sides wondering what more they can do. No matter what their differences, there is one basic truth that unites them.
The same way they love their children, we love ours. We want them to be happy, not enemies.
They been going through the same thing, children as children.
And their children harbor the same dream to once again feel free.
All I want is to be secure and live in quiet and peace.
I dream of living like other children, in freedom and peace, in joy and happiness.
The children of Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory are not alone. Tens of millions of children live in conflict zones worldwide. Later on 21st century, after the nuclear blasts, a legacy of devastation.